Hello, everyone. Welcome to TechSPARK's 13th virtual coffee morning. It's my first one as a host, so clearly everything's going to go wrong. But it does mean I've had a shave for the first time in 3 months, so you're all very welcome. Today, we are talking about how to get in the news, how to write a press release, how to get it published, how to build relationships with those enigmatic ignorers of emails that are journalists. I'm joined by Emily Perkins, head of McDonald Tait, and Martin Booth. And I think the first question we'll start with is just to ask you guys to tell us a little bit about yourselves. So who wants to kick us off? Heather?
Yeah, great. Hi. So I'm Heather. I've been working in the tech industry in Bristol for about 15 to 20 years now. Mainly, I've been working in-house in high-tech companies, so chip companies. I worked in one startup which scaled and sold to a multinational chip company and worked for them for 4 years. And then I was one of the early team in Ultra Haptics and now Ultra Leap. I left there about 18 months ago because I realised that there was a lack of PRs in the local area that were supporting young tech startups to really scale and to get their messaging right. So I started Y Communications 18 months ago, and I now work with a range of startups, scale-ups, and some larger businesses in Bristol and further afield.
Great. Martin?
Yeah, hi, I'm Martin Booth. I'm an enigmatic ignorer of emails. That sums it up quite nicely, actually. If I do ignore your emails, it's not because I'm being rude. It's because I'm being just basically rudeness. So I do apologise for that. But so I'm Martin Booth. I'm the editor of Bristol 24/7. So for those not aware, we're a website and a printed monthly magazine. Although for the last few months, because of various global events, we haven't managed to print our monthly magazine, but we're going to be returning to that in October. It's an incredible time really to be a journalist. One, to be a journalist full stop, and B, to be a journalist in Bristol, which is more than ever seemingly at the centre of global conversations. Genuinely, it's a staggering time. So as editor, it's my responsibility to just ensure that we cover all of what's happening in the city, and that's from tech startups to coffee stalls openings. So my job really is just to tell the stories of what's happening in the city.
Brilliant. And Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a storyteller by profession, so I've worked with some big globals like Samsung, Sony, Beats, telling their story to their audiences, as well as some of the smaller but emerging leaders in sectors like 5G, robotics, AI. I'm now the Chief Brand Officer at Epro, which is a health tech company that supports the NHS. I started that job the day before lockdown, so as you can imagine, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. As during my time, I guess I've placed stories with titles like BBC, ITV, Guardian, as well as really specific titles in sectors. And when I'm not working, which at the moment doesn't seem any time at all, I'm a best-selling novelist. So yeah, storytelling is the focus for me.
Wow. Best-selling, chucking that in at the end there.
You got to chuck it in. People don't ask you about it. You got to chuck it in.
Amazing. I should say as well, I'm not sure I actually introduced myself. So if anybody doesn't know, I am Geraint. I am the editor at TechSPARK, which is why this opportunity has been so forcefully thrust upon me to host this panel. Wonderful. So should we kick off with the first thing, I suppose, which is what do you guys consider to be the basics of putting together a press release? Where does a company start? Should we start with you, Emily, this time?
Yeah, I think 9 times out of 10, if you think you should be writing a press release, I generally think you don't. I think that a press release is really specific for a story that is of actual interest to people who don't know you or know who you are. And actually, a lot of kind of company news or kind of more general announcements are better placed for your blog or for LinkedIn, or, you know, for something that's a little bit more internally focused. So I think the first step is, do you actually have a story that is worth telling to someone who may not know who you are? Because it's really, really frustrating to spend a lot of time dedicating yourself to writing a press release when actually, when you get to the end of it, you look at it and think, actually, I'm not sure whether this is newsworthy. So that's where I'd start.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the objective of the press release needs to be really clear before you start. What do you actually want people to feel, think, and do when they read the press release? Journalists, do you want them to think, you know, this is going to be great for my publication, my readers are going to be really interested in this? And what do you want the end audience to do as well? So I think a lot of press releases are written very generally and not focused on specific kind of sectors of the press. So for tech, as this is TechSPARK, I think, you know, that you'll have your local press, you have your business press, and you have your trade press as well, which is often overlooked, actually. And I think it's important that you make sure that you have an objective for the press release and that you target it properly at the right press.
Sure. And Martin, I suppose the question's a little bit different for you. I mean, I'm not sure how often you send out press releases yourself, but I mean, what do you think that people should have in their press release?
Yeah, before we start, I've got my first apology to make. I've already been told by Margaret Davidson that I've ignored her enigmatically, so sorry, Margaret, for that. I would say, yeah, I mean, I have actually dabbled in the dark arts of PR in various redundancies over the years. So I have had battles with funders about whose logo to use bigger and whose quote to go first, and all of that jazz that quite a lot of people will probably appreciate is not too much fun when you're having arguments about logo size, which matters to not a single person outside these organizations. I mean, for me, I really don't mind how I receive information. It could be within an email, it could be within a phone call, it could be just a DM on Twitter, just to tell me that something's happening. I think that press releases are often quite an old-fashioned way of getting the news across. So by all means, they serve a purpose, but I think as Emily and Heather both said, they need to serve a specific purpose, and ask yourself, is this bit of news worthy of spending my time drafting a press release and sending it out? Is there a better way of telling this particular story?
Yeah, and I think there's some real basics that are often missed. I mean, in reviewing press releases for others, I've seen press releases with no contact details at the bottom. That's totally useless. If someone wants to get in touch with you and get more information, they're not going to be able to do that. So please put contact details, you know, a phone number that someone's actually going to pick up. And another thing I've noticed a lot is really huge images within a press release or huge video attachments in an email, which are just going to get completely eaten up by a spam filter. And it's not even that no one's going to be, you know, moved or empowered by your story. They're never going to read it because it's never going to actually hit their inbox. So on a really technical note, those are two things that I'd flag.
Yeah, one of the first things I normally do with clients is to get them a Dropbox press kit, because one of the things they like to do is send out press releases without photos, which of course in today's digital era is completely useless, because if there's no photo, it means the journalist then has to go around and find something that vaguely represents the story, which is just lazy from a PR point of view, I think. And I think also people don't think about the difference between print and digital. So digital might want low res images, whereas print want high res, and then also just fitting it on the page. So making sure there's a picture that can be resized to be landscape or portraits, I think is really important. Would you guys agree, journalists?
Oh, this is absolute dream talk. These sorts of discussions, because there's two ends of the spectrum, really. You might get a press release with an image literally the size of a thumbnail. Or you might get a press release with an image 12 megabytes large that obliterates your inbox. And so I think that's where Dropbox can work. That's where Dropbox can work really, really well. And And as Heather just said, and this is such an important consideration for us, just in the way that our site is configured, landscape versus portrait. You need to have that choice. We only talking from Bristol 24/7, we need a landscape image as our main header image for every single story. So if we're only sent portrait images, especially of people, like all you see is a massive eyes and a huge nose. It's no help to anybody. So I think you probably can understand it once you know the people that you're talking to, their own consideration. I think that's really important, rather than like a blanket one that everyone can appreciate, that's just for them, because we've all got slightly different ways we need to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, sort of on the other side of a bad image, the email I send most regularly to people is, can you please send me an image? The amount of releases I get which are just bare text and nothing it's staggering to me.
I think it's really challenging though. One of the things that I found really interesting working with tech companies that are very ephemeral, that don't have hardware, is that there's a challenge of, well, I don't have a photo, like I can't take a photo of AI, I can't take a photo of 5G, how do I get around that? And I think people, if you're having that challenge as a brand, then just imagine what the journalist is going to have. They don't know your brand. If you're struggling to think of something, it's going to be impossible for a journalist with 400 other emails in their inbox to take the time to sit and think, oh, I wonder what stock image I can find that will best represent this. So, everything you do in the press release should be removing an issue for the journalist. And if you have that mindset, I think it quite quickly comes together.
And there's some compliance things as well for those that are listening, I think, regarding rights on images. That's really important. So you can't just clip something off of the tinterwebs and send it out. You need to check the legals. So Shutterstock will sell you photographs that you can use in press, but some of them you can't. And any photographer, I've got a brilliant photographer, if anybody wants to ask afterwards, that I use a lot. Any photographer you need to have agreement with them that you can use the photographs and issue them to publications. Because
all about attributions.
Yeah, and it's just really important. It's really easy to sort out. Quick Google and check, in writing with whomever you're using, or with the supplier of images. But it makes it a lot easier for journalists, I imagine, then, if they know that you've got rights for the pictures, so they're not going to get in trouble for reprinting things. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's and actually, if there are any companies that are struggling to like, what do I take a photo of? Take a photo of your team. I'll say as well, just pictures of people in general. I can see from the analytics they get clicked on more than a building or whatever. Even if you are a hardware company, take a picture of your team. So I suppose actually, we're sort of moving towards the next point, which is how do people start to write to their specific audience? How do they make sure they've got that so what moment in their story? Who wants to kick us off? I don't mind.
So I think, considering I'm called Why Communications and why should anybody give a damn, frankly? I guess I should go with that. And that's about listening, I think. Good PR is about listening to what the journalists are writing, what their readers are interested in, what they're commenting on. Being on social media, setting up tools to listen to whatever your subject is. There are tools such as answerthepublic.com, which is really great to hear what people are asking and talking about, and then you can respond. And if you respond, then you get your why lands much, much stronger. So with every press release, and this is, the real basics, you're looking at getting facts in there as quickly and as closely packed as possible. So that's your who, what, I wrote it down in case I forgot one. Who, what, when, where, and why. So get your facts in there first, and then say why it's important to the world. So that might be, if you were doing the classic at the moment, which is taking a tech solution and spinning it because there's a pandemic going on, then you'd be talking about why that's specifically important right now because of the pandemic. It's about listening to the audience and tying your story into a narrative that's already present.
Yeah, and I think, just picking up on what Heather said around knowing your audience, do your research on the title that you're going to pitch to. Please read the last 5 articles that journalist has written, because if they've already covered that exact same story, they're not going to want to hear a repeat. If they are writing a completely different beat to their Twitter bio, because they haven't updated their Twitter bio, but all you're doing is doing a 30-second check on Twitter, they're going to be like, well, you've got no idea what I'm writing. It's such an easy thing to do, and it removes so many pitfalls. And I think when it comes to the so what, I have a real pet hate for filler words. So if I see a press release that says world leading, best, newly improved, never before, I don't believe a single word in the rest of the press release, because it's just it feels like you're trying to make something out of nothing. Now, those can all be true things, but tell me why it's world leading. Why is it the best? How have you made it new and improved? That's the detail that someone's going to want to see.
And a press release should be subjective. So it should be, it shouldn't be subjective, it should be factual. So you should take out anything that's subjective in there, I think. So it's very factual. And you're spaced for any kind of bold claims, any hyperbole is in your quotes. If you want to say this is fantastic, then great. But I always coach clients that if they're writing a press release, it should be that a journalist can literally, if they need to, want to, have to, cut and paste it in, and it sounds like they're saying it. And they shouldn't have to fact check anything, because anything that's in there, any claims that are in there should be substantiated according to X, Y, Z. This happened, and anything that is opinion should be in the quote. That's what the quote's for. It's for opinion rather than fact. And I think that's really important. And it's also a legal consideration as well. So a press release, I'm very strict about this. A press release should always be signed off by a director of the company before it goes out. Have the word approved in written. I've had people say, yeah, looks great. So I'm like, no, I need the word. Because it's a legal statement from the company. And it's something that if a tech company were to be acquired, which I've been through an M&A process, the lawyers will look through press releases that have been written and check that you're not making any unsubstantiated claims or claiming anything that's not true, world leading, for example. And you could be challenged on that by customers or by anybody else, any acquirers. So it's important that everything is 100% rock solid facts in your press releases.
Yeah, I think you've got to be mindful that from the journalists that I speak to, they're getting 400 or 500 emails plus a day. They do not want to sit there and think, is this world leading? What's going on? As Heather says, if they're really that busy, they want to be able to copy and paste. But you've also got to imagine they're sitting opposite you and they're going to challenge every single sentence in that press release. Why is it world leading? Why are you announcing this now? Who is this person? Why are they an expert? And if you are not answering those questions in the press release, you're just, again, creating barriers for yourself, which you just don't need.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I hate world leading as a phrase. But the other thing is, someone once described journalists to me as being both very busy and very lazy at the same time. So we've got a lot of stuff to do. And not much time to do it in, and we don't want to do it. So if I'm reading through a press release and I see something like world leading, I know I've now got to put a huge amount of scrutiny into that. So the central claim of your story better be worth me doing that. Otherwise, I'm going to pick something else. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah, I think that I think what Heather said about the quotes is a really good point. I mean, I would say whenever I'm giving advice to my reporters, I would say that when they're using quotes, use them sparingly, and so just talking about what an ideal story would look like for me, it's those emotive quotes that would be the ones that are used, and the factual information is contained elsewhere. So within press releases, if you want to say that this is use all the superlatives you want, but in a quote is a place for those. And also just cheekily get your company's name in the quotes, because if as journalists we're using the quotes, we're going to use that quote probably verbatim. Therefore, if you can squeeze your company's name in the quote, then you've got your company's name in the piece. Is a cheeky little tip.
Nice.
Very kind of you to give that advice out there. We're not supposed to tell them these things.
Oh, and also, can we ban the word excited, please, just from the Bristol Tech Cluster? I'm
excited to announce. I'm excited to reveal.
Yeah, can we just ban it?
I think, that is a very overused term. I think that.
Can I just say I'm excited about Geraint's cat?
He's excited to be part of the call.
It reminds me. I think it's one of the Canterbury Cathedral team that often has a cat wandering into shot when he's giving a prayer. So I'm expecting Geraint to offer some kind of thoughtful
Information brought to you by cat.
No, I just don't have a bookcase downstairs, so I thought the cat tree would do.
I think that it's about it's a really tough one, really, because what grabs interest is going to be different from one journalist to another. I mean to be brutally honest, it's and this is really bad admitting it, but a lot of what gets my attention is just a complete fluke. It's not really very scientific, and so if you kind of increase your chances of being that fluke, so, and again, like without being annoying, send an email, pick up the phone, maybe contact me on Twitter, just say got something that I think might be interesting. Maximize your chances. Be tenacious, but not annoying.
It's a careful balance, right?
It's a really careful balance. I think that a good and I completely appreciate that not everyone is going to be working for a firm that you do, Heather, perhaps need sign off for. You're not going to be working for a big firm. You might be a one person band. Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune, send the press release out about the theme tune. And so it's a tough. I completely appreciate that it's a tough gig, but I was, I think for me, it's the people that want to build up a relationship, like a professional relationship. And I know that's difficult if you're contacting me for the first time, but treat journalists as real people rather than just a name. Again, it's a really difficult balance. But if you're passing through Bristol and want to meet up for a coffee at Hearts and share a custard tart or cinnamon bun, then I am your man, and I'd bite your hand off to have a coffee and talk about your company.
Nice. Stories for food and coffee. Brilliant.
I think one of the things that companies don't think about sometimes is what the point of getting the coverage is. So we talked a little bit before about kind of targeting at different journalists, and I think one of the areas that people don't think about is what they're going to use it for afterwards. And I think there are only kind of 3 main reasons why you should get PR, and one of them is awareness, either of who you are in the first place or what you're doing, because you're already known, and the other one is credibility. So getting publications that you then share with your target audience and say, look, we're real, we're out here, we're doing this, people are writing about us, which is a really big one, especially for some of the kind of broadcast press, we're on BBC, we're on Sky, we did this, we were in The Guardian. And then I think the third one is ego, which I think people can be quite snobby about and dishonest about and embarrassed about, why do you want to be in there? Because I really want to show my mum that I'm in the Times. But actually, it's a really legitimate thing, especially for startups, because it really kind of helps you to have pride in what you're doing, and other people are talking about you, and helps your team to have pride in that. So having a great piece in Bristol 24/7 and saying, look, we're here, look, there's a photograph of our team in the paper, cut it out, send it to your grandma. And that's actually a really legitimate thing, and I think that people shouldn't be embarrassed about wanting it for ego, basically.
Being a founder can be a really lonely journey. And, I'm not a founder, so let's just put it out there. I don't know it. It's not a lived experience for me, but I've worked really closely with a lot of founders of various ages and various backgrounds and various industries. And actually having that external acceptance that actually you founded a company, or you've got an idea, or you've done something that's good enough to be in X, can sometimes be that motivation to actually, it's been tough, it is tough, it's going to stay tough for a little while, but we're getting somewhere, there is momentum. And that can often be the difference. As Heather says, it is ego, but actually for someone who's, very much on their own leading a company, they need something to keep them motivated.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've fixed it, we've solved the problem.
So I guess, we've talked a little bit about this already. So I want to circle back to see if we've missed anything, I suppose, in mistakes. Like we've talked a bit about mistakes that people make with images and world-leading press releases. But is there anything that you see, like fundamentally, that companies are just hurting themselves with, I suppose, or hurting their chances with?
I think not announcing. Sorry, I jumped in again.
Carry on.
Not announcing things that are important. So I'll find, I'll go to a client and they say, we're doing a press release because we've hired an executive, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'll just chat to them for half an hour. And then it's like that. There's a saying, isn't there? The doctor's door. As you put your hand on the door, you say the important thing that's really scary to leave. And they'll drop something in about how they've just started working with an amazing client. And I'm like, are you allowed to talk about that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's the press release. Nobody cares about the other thing. So I think, and just it sounds like we're saying, oh, you need to get photographs in 17 different varieties, and then we need to do this, and then you need to do this. And it's actually pretty simple. You just need to write down who, what, where, when, why, give them a couple of quotes, couple of photographs, and get it out there, and make sure that you're not putting too much superlatives in there and world's leading. And there are lots of opportunities that people miss to tell their story, or they go broadcast with it and send it out to everybody, in which case there's no special deal with the journalist. But if you've gone for a custard tart and or a pint with a journalist, and you know them well, and you're like, I know they will like the story, they will cover it, then you can give exclusives and just say, look, it's really targeted, this is the story, this is where it's going. But I think not telling the story is something that some companies don't do.
Yeah. I think the thing that I talk about a lot with my team is burying the gold. And that's often a little bit of an extension of what Heather's talking about, but actually in the press release. And I think this is really typical for startups in tech who are very used to writing long reports or white papers. They have 4,000 words to get to the good stuff. And actually sometimes I'll look at a press release and it's like, excited to announce new world leading, which does this. And I'm like, whoa, you can do that? That's a thing that can now be done, but it's 4 paragraphs down, like it's barely on the front page of your 14-page press release, which, by the way, should not be that long. And I call that burying the gold of actually there is something really interesting. There is a story there, but a journalist isn't going to find it because it's so far down. Like they are reading the first paragraph, and then if it interests, they're going to keep reading. But if it's right down the bottom, like you're doing yourself a favor to bring it right up to the top, even though it feels, and for some people this is a bit odd to shout about your own business or to shout about yourself as a founder or yourself as an inventor. Actually, that is the point of the press release. You are shouting about yourself. Bring that gold right up to the top and really, really go for it without superlatives. I know that sounds really contradictory.
Yeah. Martin, I can see you nodding very
Yeah. No, that's really good points made there from Emily. I think we call it in the trade, like, what's the top line? If I send my reporters out and they come back and they're a little bit unsure about how to formulate the story, I ask, what's the top line? And so if you meet your mate in the pub after work and you say, guess who I spoke to today? This is what, what's that first thing that you say? What's that first thing that you want to tell people about what you've just discovered? So that's the top line. That's the most important bit of information within your news. That's the headline. That's the first line of the press release. There was something else I was going to say. Can't remember. But it's just really important. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Sorry. I had an early start this morning because I was at the Black Lives Matter statue being taken down and put unceremoniously into a skip. So please forgive my meanders. Oh God, I forgot what I was going to say again. I'm so sorry. You're never going to invite me back.
That's quite all right. That was about 4:30 this morning, wasn't it? So
yeah.
Not just an early morning. That's a very early morning.
I can't believe I forgot what I was going to say in the process of remembering what I was going to say.
Top line.
Top line. Come back to me.
I'll come back to it. I will say as well, it's not always a case of just burying the gold. From what there are plenty of press releases that I've received which don't tell me why you're doing a thing at all. Like they ignore the why. They'll tell you who they are and what they're doing. But
I remember what I was going to say. And I think Geraint hit the nail on the head there completely. Is that you need to be sparing in the news that you tell people. So if, for example, you've got someone's risen from like junior UX designer to like mid-level, that's not interesting to the wider world. That's not a story. And so it doesn't, I get emails like that all the time, kind of internal appointments.
Yeah.
And that might be a story for one organization, like fair play if they think that that's a story, but it's certainly not a story for my organization. So you've kind of got to think, like, what do we really want to shout about? What do we want to tell the world? And that's not an internal appointment for Bristol 24/7.
And I think, Martin, that thing about that you said about trying to not say everything can happen within an individual press release as well. I try and stick to 3 points that they want to make, and that's probably too many in a lot of cases. So when I'm writing a product press release, for example, product announcement, which is often, again, not for Bristol 24/7, might be for TechSPARK, but more likely trade. They want to stuff every single fact about the product in, and that's when you need to understand what the objective of a press release is. It's to raise awareness and not to sell the entire product and have them sign a PA by the end of reading the article. It's just to get awareness and drive traffic. So you only need to say the top 3 features and benefits at the most of a product, rather than trying to get it all in.
Yeah, and I think there's some real, again, just bring it back to real technical basics. If you're emailing someone, spell their name correctly. Do not paste someone else's name into your email. It is the most cringeworthy thing you can do. And I would just delete that email. I wouldn't read the attachment. I wouldn't, be looking into this anymore. So like real basics, make sure that you're sending it to the right email address, to the right person with their name spelt correctly, because that's such an easy mistake you can avoid. And you just don't want to do yourself out of an opportunity.
Absolutely. I should say as well to the audience that if you have any questions, do pop them up along the side, and we'll get to them sort of once we're ready. I'll say getting people's name right as a man with a Welsh name living in England. I've got a whole new range of sort of passive aggressive ways to respond to people, just with the formatting of my own name in the response. Yeah. So I think a good place to go from there is we've talked a little bit about, buying Martin some stuff from Hearts, but how do you go about building those relationships with journalists?
I would say, know for a fact that custard tarts are only available from Thursdays. So if you're going to invite me to Hearts on a Tuesday, know full well that I'd probably go for pain au chocolat or maybe a cinnamon bun.
You heard it first.
Do your research. Do your research. No, it's there's often a kind of often it's about playing the game, being a PR, and the game isn't to become BFFs with the journalist, but you do have to build that relationship, and I think relationships are always better built. I'm going to say in real life, that might be more tricky in 2020, but they are always better in real life. I can now, whenever I've met someone for a coffee, probably a coffee rather than a pint, I do like to be an old-fashioned journalist, but it's probably going to be a coffee these days rather than a pint. But just to chat about everything and nothing, maybe meandering back to the company that you're representing or the organization that you work for, just having a chat, getting to know you is I'm going to be loads more receptive to what you're then sending through, and probably far more politely brush it aside. But if that relationship has built up, I think that hopefully if you're a professional PR, or if you've got loads of hats on, I don't think you should expect every single press release you send. You need to be realistic. Not every single press release you send out is going to be received and going to get you coverage. And so that's when you have to be a little bit more strategic, and appreciate full well that not everything is going to be published. But building relationships is a tricky one, and that it does depend on the individual. It does depend on the person you want to build relationships with.
It's about mutual respect as well. There are some journalists that I haven't got on with particularly well, so I haven't particularly chased that, because I want to work with journalists that I get on well, that I can have a bit of banter with, and that we have mutual respect for each other, and you can be quite thick-skinned as well. So that whole, I might pitch something at journalists that I consider really good mates with, and they won't say anything. They won't get back to me. And I'm totally fine with that now. It's quite a hard thing to get used to. And then I'll see them and I'll be like, hey, you didn't cover my piece. And they're like, yeah, sorry, it wasn't right. Knew I didn't have to get back to you because I knew you wouldn't, burst into tears and never talk to me again. Or it wasn't right at the right time. And that thick skin and that patience. And I think that's the thing about relationships. It's not about an instant, you go in and you get a story. It's about understanding the journalist, understanding what the journalist's interested in, what their readers are interested in, and the best way to approach them, because they have different preferences, whether they like a formal press release or whether they just want a quick DM. And then having that relationship so that when the time is right, you can, and they're writing about that, and the story is at the right time. You've just got to get all those kind of forces aligning. So it's not a cup of coffee and then we want front page tomorrow.
I think actually listening to what they're looking for and what they want, time and time again, the journalist will say to me, well, I know I technically cover the housing beat, but actually I'm really interested in 3D printed housing right now. So if you can find me anything like that, that's the sort of thing I want to cover. So actually having that conversation to find out, rather than just spamming press releases over and over again and not actually understanding, well, maybe there's a reason I'm never hearing back from this journalist. Maybe there's a reason they've never covered any of my stories. I think you've got to be realistic of, it's not a friendship, it's a business relationship. So they're not going to pick up the phone to you and say, hey, do you have any stories for me today? Because they're being hounded by countless other people. And I think also recognizing that, sometimes even with the best will in the world, the timing just isn't going to be right for them. They have other pressures, they have editors, they have changes in direction, they have time-dependent things. I mean, my favorite ever story of this is when I worked for 6 weeks on one story with a client, which was about grieving through AI. It was really interesting. It had a really great YouGov poll behind it. It was, really tangible stuff. And the day that we scheduled it to go live, I got up that morning, had a look at the news, and Harry and Meghan announced they were pregnant. And I was like, no! Oh! And it was so frustrating. It was nothing to do with the story we put together, nothing to do with the press release. We could have had the best press release in the world that day. We were never, ever going to get any coverage. And you know what? I picked up the phone to the journalist. I said, look, I just want to say right now, I'm not going to expect you to cover my story today. I don't want you to feel pressure, to get back to me. I'm reaching out to you to say, I recognize there's a bigger thing going on. And that really grew the relationship. I didn't get any coverage that day, but I was then able to place a story 2 months later because there was an understanding and a trust there that actually I understood the pressures they were under.
Yeah. So we've only got a few minutes left. But actually, one of the questions we've had sort of links into not Harry and Meghan specifically, but interrupting perhaps your normal operation. Obviously, Black Lives Matter and COVID are the most prescient and present examples. When do you think it's appropriate? I know, Heather, you referenced this sort of towards the start of the chat, to fold your company in, say, to that discussion. Like, when is it okay? When is it not okay? How should you be thinking? Do you think?
Who wants to go first on that?
Sorry.
No.
Go on, you.
I was going to say the most frustrating thing I see as a consumer is when a brand that has no authentic connection to an event or a movement trying to piggyback on the number of, and I say this, as a white, middle-class, educated, able, cisgender person, so I am very privileged as an individual, but the number of companies that I see who are all male, all white, all able-bodied, all cisgender, trying to make statements about Black Lives Matter and doing it in a very tone-deaf way because it's not lived experience and it's nothing to do with their brand is genuinely painful. So in most cases, if you feel passionately as an individual about a cause, that is totally fine and totally appropriate and good. Get involved, get engaged. But as a brand, it might not come across well. So just sense check that immediate impulse and actually maybe speak to someone from that movement and say, hey, we want to get involved. How can we support? Rather than just tweeting, we support.
Yeah, I think it's about listening again and about having something to say. And if you don't have anything to say, then don't say anything.
Yeah, there's a section in Private Eye magazine. I can't remember what it's called, but it's something like foot in mouth marketing, or it's just examples of companies that have just completely piggybacked inappropriately on the back of global events. And even just reading that column once or twice will give you a sense of what not to do. I think it's got to be completely genuine if you're going to attempt to position yourself or your company alongside something seismic, whatever that could be. Because if you're pretending to be something that you're not doing yourself a justice either.
Yeah, and to give a real world recent example of that, Epro is a health tech company. We support digital services for hospitals, and one of our trusts that we support was at the very forefront of COVID in the first 2 weeks of April, and we did a lot of custom work for them that enabled them to keep their patients safe and keep their staff safe. Now that is a story that's topical. We are genuinely involved in that. We are delivering that. And I made the decision that we weren't going to go to press, even though it was true, even though it was authentic, even though it was right and relevant, because the last thing that we thought anyone would want to read is a company saying, hey, look at us, we're so great, we're, doing our bit. No one's interested in that. People were interested in the realities of people in the NHS and those who were affected by COVID. And so we thought, actually, the most empowering thing we can do is just deliver as a business. And you know what? There'll be a case study out of it. And we put a very short case study out, I think, a few weeks ago. So very far, comparatively to how far long lockdown feels. And that was very much about celebrating the work that trust did and how honoured we were to be a part of it. But it didn't go to press. It was just a very short blog on our website. And I think actually, there will be situations where you are doing incredible things, and that's great. But that's an internal communication. That's celebrating your staff. That's celebrating your own innovation. That's thanking people. That's going to stakeholders or the board and saying, actually, we're making a real tangible difference here. But the press might not need to know. And that's hard because you want to celebrate what you're doing, but it's just that sense check.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that. So we're sort of at the end here, but there's one question that TechSPARK always asks, which I have to ask, which is, what do you think makes the tech community in Bristol and Bath so special? Anybody? Heather, you work with you. Well.
Oh, is it special? I think it is. It's an ecosystem, and whenever a really well-functioning ecosystem, and whenever I think of ecosystems, I think of kind of being 6 and learning about a pond and how it functions. And I think you've got your bigger players, your tiny players, your medium-sized players. There's plenty of nutrition around. Every now and then you get something flying in from London and back out again. And it functions well because it's really well connected and full of love. I think that's a bit hippie, isn't it? But there's lots of love in the Bristol ecosystem for people, and looking out for each other and being collaborative, and that's really important across different size businesses. So yeah,
absolutely. Emily?
I think and this is something that's said a lot, so this is not original thought, it's the work-life balance. It's being able to have a life as well as work. I think tech particularly, or in all jobs, but tech particularly, you need to be creative, you need to be innovative, you need to problem solve, and it's a lot easier to do that if you're relatively well rested, that you're enjoying the life that you lead outside of the office, even if your office is your house, which I think for most of us it has become. And I think being able to live a full life means that actually some of the innovations we see in Bristol and Bath are just better.
Cool. And Martin, I suppose you've got a bit of a broader focus than the rest of us here. From that position.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position, and sometimes not so fortunate, that my work-life balance is so closely intertwined that I'm sometimes literally embodying the Bristol 24/7 brand values. But I would say that I think my esteemed panel members have said about collaboration, which is so wonderful to see. And I think that there are some industries in Bristol that are just absolutely thrive on collaboration, and they all need to survive as individual businesses, but collaboration makes them thrive together stronger, rather than that competition that I get the sense that other cities perhaps might be a little bit more cutthroat. The collaboration is so important, and stories about collaboration are some of the ones that I'm most interested in hearing about. Yeah, work-life balance and general just being in a really buzzing, vibrant city. I couldn't right now imagine living anywhere else, and just the sense of wonder and discovery. I think that I'm still wide-eyed. I really want to know what's going on in Bristol, and as a resident of Bristol as well as a professional news gatherer, it's just a really exciting place to be.
Wonderful. So, sorry, a cat just charged right into the room at that point. So I think we're at the end there. Thank you to Emily, Heather, and Martin. Hopefully, Martin gets quite a few invites to Hearts off the back of this. From Thursdays onwards only. Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure. Well, at least Heather will be willing to take your calls. No, I mean, I think in a lot of cases with journalists, you can just phone them, and you can. So if you have questions or if you want to know what to do with your stories, I would do that. If anybody wants to hang around, I'm not sure if our panelists will be joining, but there will be a networking session, and it's actually happening pretty much now. Yeah, I think we're there. Are we there?
Well done, Geraint. You managed it.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't work out how to end it. I thought a lot about beginning, and now I'm still not ending it.
No, you hang up. No, you hang up.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.